Hi there from Chicago. This is Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Thrilled to have you with us, Mike Hall and Anthony Herron. I joked in the beginning, but it's not the real reveal of the playoff rankings. There's 6 of them.
It's a big deal.
Only one matters.
It's a big day in this country. The playoff rankings are being revealed tonight.
I think that's the main thing on everybody's mind, right?
It shouldn't be, but
can't think of anything else.
It very much is. Yes. A lot of stuff happening.
Let's bring in Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, who ditched us last week, but he's back again. Hello, Ross.
Hey, guys. How are y'all? I missed you.
Oh.
Sold that real well. There's a lot of energy.
I felt the warmth myself.
Heartfelt passion behind that
you.
very cold, I missed you. Like a teleprompter was telling you what to say. All right, let's get to our big story. It is indeed the projected playoff bracket. Here's what The Athletic is assuming is going to happen. Oregon would be in for the Big Ten as the Big Ten champion. They've got Ohio State as the 5. That would be a second Big Ten team. Penn State, which just lost to the Buckeyes, in at 7. And the Indiana Hoosiers, not only in a 4th Big Ten team in, Indiana higher ranked than Texas and Alabama.
Let's go.
What a world we are living in right now. Again, that is if the playoff were to happen today, according to The Athletic.
And if The Athletic is accurate, I suppose, as well.
That's the other thing. It's a different committee full of different people with different eyeballs and different criteria. Still, we are allowed to legitimately think, hope, and at this point expect 4 Big Ten teams in this reveal later on this evening.
The conference has earned that up to this point in the calendar. When you think about the way that the Big Ten has performed, yes, there's been this sort of upper quadrant of the league that's been separating itself from the remainder of the Big Ten landscape for several weeks at this point. You continue to see excellence even when the teams face each other. That Ohio State-Penn State game was this epic, titanic clash, not only of brands, but of players on the field that came down to critical moments late in that contest. So even with a game like that, you don't have something that really diminishes the resume of the opposition. You just see a great game played out that's decided in the final moments. It was the same thing between the Ducks and the Bucks just a few weeks ago. So the conference is delivering in so many ways. And yes, while Indiana's schedule is one that you wouldn't necessarily say is going to have the highest strength of schedule that's there, but when you look at the way the Hoosiers have dominated and just wiped the floor with opponent after opponent over and over again, then yes, they have set themselves up to be squarely in the mix here.
Ross, it looks like 4 teams from this conference are going to be there tonight. You agree?
Yeah, I would say so, right? Penn State, Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon are certainly the 4 that I would expect to be in the top 12 of the CFP rankings. Now, remember, in the 12-team format, the rankings won't correlate with the seeding in a playoff bracket, in a projected playoff bracket. So got to keep reminding folks of that because the top 4 seeds are only reserved for the conference champions. They get the bye and they get the top 4 seeds. So you're liable to see Ohio State ranked 2 or 3 in the rankings, but in a playoff bracket, if you shifted that over, transition the rankings into a playoff bracket, they would be 5th seeded, right? They wouldn't be in the top 4. So you'd pencil in Oregon as the champion in the top 4. So I would expect, and I think the projection there you just showed is fairly accurate, and it kind of goes down the AP poll, how the AP poll kind of has the teams. But for me, one of the key questions is how will the committee differentiate between Indiana and Penn State? The problem with the Hoosiers, we've talked about it before, is the strength of schedule, 81st overall ranking of a strength of schedule. Ohio State's around in the 40s. Penn State's at 32 when you look at the strength of schedule, right? And so how will the committee put Indiana or Penn State ahead? Who's ahead there, kind of in that battle? So that's an interesting thing that I'm watching when it comes to the Big Ten type of pecking order, because we know it probably will be, right, Oregon and then Ohio State. It's who is after that. How will Indiana and Penn State stack up and be ranked?
I love that observation, Ross, and it gives a degree of credibility to what Indiana's done so far this season, because it shouldn't be about the logo on the helmet. It shouldn't be about the brand that you enter the season with, but those are humans on the committee who are sort of judging these things. And so, if it's not just some sort of computerized system that's deciding everything, then I think that human bias is likely to be a part of this. But when you're kind of squaring up Indiana versus everyone else, the quality of their wins, the quality of the opponents that they've played and defeated is not on par with a few of the teams that are regarded ahead of them so far this season. But that game control, and what surprises me a little bit when you look at, at least where ESPN has them in game control right now with their power index, they've got Indiana somehow at 4th in game control, when truly, literally, statistically, there is not another team in college football who's been as dominant this season as the Indiana Hoosiers and won every game. They've got a 0 in the loss column. Their margin of victory goes beyond what anyone else is doing so far this year. And yes, they are in the midst of conference play. And it seems like the competition only gets tougher every week for the Hoosiers. So that question of how they regard Indiana versus Penn State, you can make the case of questioning how do they even regard Indiana versus Ohio State as well, because the Hoosiers have played of that caliber. Their performance has been that so far this season. So, I certainly would be willing to say that when I do my personal power rankings, I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, Indiana's the second best team in the Big Ten Conference. Now, most folks out there aren't going to view them in that way, but their performance has earned that. So I don't think there should be any question Indiana's in the top 10, but the logo, the helmet, the brand in college football, that does feel like it ends up mattering in these conversations.
Which, as we've discussed, it shouldn't.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You should make decisions on what happened this year, not some programs past. It's different players against different opponents who had different players, so it should only be this year. But still, Russ, to your point, though, about, this is the first year of the 12-team playoff, so we should remind people the top 4 seeds will be conference champion. The other thing to remind people is seeds 5 through 8 will have a home game. So if the Athletic is accurate, Indiana would host a playoff game, Ross.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. 5, 6, 7, 8 host a first-round playoff game on December 20th or 21st, which, look, there's nothing probably I've been more excited for in college football in my career than these home playoff games. We've never really had it in college football. We've had sort of playoff games, regular season type of playoff games, right, that eliminate a team from contention in the BCS or in the 4-team playoff, but we never actually had an official postseason game on a campus, and that is just really, really exciting, right? And something that I'm pumped up about. But you're right, Indiana and Penn State should both be in the top 8, and they should be within the 5 to 8 range. And so right now, penciled in, if the playoff happened this week, they would both host playoff games and probably host there's a group of like SEC teams like Tennessee and Alabama, those type of teams that are kind of in Notre Dame, are kind of in the 9 to 11, 9 to 12 type of range that they would host.
Pretty wild. Allow yourself a moment to think of the insanity of Bloomington hosting a playoff game. It's just an incredible, incredible thing to think about. By the way, the Hoosiers moved up in the AP poll once again. They took a pretty big jump in the AP poll. They moved up 5 spots to number 8 in the latest edition. Penn State dropped a few. They're down 3 different spots now to number 6. And let's focus on that game now. Again, the rankings come out later tonight, but we can look back on that Penn State-Ohio State game. Ross, how would you describe the national reaction and fallout to Penn State losing to Ohio State? Because on the one hand, it was close. It was a 1-score game. It was against a great opponent. On the other hand, it is yet again a close loss to a top 5 team for Penn State.
Yeah, kind of same old song, right, for James Franklin in Penn State. Now 1-10 in his tenure in State College against Ohio State. Nationally, a lot of the focus was certainly on that, right? On James Franklin, on his record. And after the game, he jawed a little bit with a couple of fans walking off the field. You could kind of feel that there is a here we go again, right? Type of mentality from the fans there. I mean, I was there at the game, and you walk through the fans who are flooding out of the stadium, right? There's plenty of things that they said most of which I cannot say on air, use the language that they said. So there's a lot of frustrations there. But you got to give credit, Anthony, for Ohio State, and especially defensively. Ohio State's offense tried to blow it, right? Will Howard had about as hot and cold as a day as a quarterback can get. He made some incredible throws, incredible runs, but he also fumbled in the back of the end zone and threw a horrible pick six. So they gifted them in a lot of ways 14 points, right? And so Ohio State needed its defense in the very end to make, an epic goal line stand. And it was pretty incredible to watch what they did. 4 plays Penn State had inside the 3-yard line, 3 runs up the middle, stuffed pretty much every time. And then the pass you see there got kind of broken up in the end zone. So credit to Jim Knowles and his defense. Really impressive.
So many of those moments, Ross, just kind of these tide-turning plays within the game. You mentioned the initial pick six that goes there against Will Howard, and some of the moments that you feel like could maybe just sort of, cripple a team as they're trying to have this moment. As Ryan Day talked about afterwards, they knew internally the gravity of what this game would end up meaning to the Buckeyes. And so, yes, there is the pick six. There is the fumble out the back of the end zone. There are players who come in, at the forefront, like on the headline of this game. And you saw Abdul Carter able to make plays. You saw a player who's extremely talented in Donovan Jackson that hadn't played left tackle before and able to kind of hold his own enough throughout that contest for the Buckeyes. And Tyler Warren with spectacular grabs and runs to help Penn State get back into this thing. And then you do have the Titanic clash in a goal-to-go scenario from the 3-yard line and the 2-yard line and the 1-yard line. And Ohio State comes up with it. And James Franklin, has talked about it a bit already this week because the questions about it being results-based are understandable, and it's kind of where we operate in the sports space. Penn State didn't score on that drive that could have tied the game late, potentially sent it to overtime. And I've been curious about Andy Kotelnicki and how he would handle some of these scenarios because of all the creativity we've seen from Penn State's offense. And in some ways, that could be viewed as sort of a finesse approach to things, but they do possess a level of power in their run game. And when you got Katron Allen and what's been a quality offensive line this season, and you got goal to go from inside the 3, my football sensibilities don't mind saying we're just going to try to move some people and see if we can put the ball in the end zone. And credit to the Buckeyes for making the play that got it done. And you saw the jubilance that was there on the faces of Ryan Day, of Chip Kelly, because of what that game meant to this season for Ohio State. And we know the late, great Quincy Jones, he just passed the other day, was talking about The Wiz with my wife and my son last night. One of the great songs from that movie is Can You Feel a Brand New Day? And so that's one thing that James Franklin has reminded folks about. This is a new day in college football. It is the expanded 12-team playoff. This loss does not end the potential for Penn State to do anything huge this year. And who have they lost to in recent years? Ohio State. So maybe they get another crack at the Buckeyes, or maybe they make the playoff and get a crack at some other squad who I would likely pick them to beat. It's mainly been the Buckeyes and the Wolverines who've been standing in the way of championships for James Franklin and Penn State.
We've talked a lot about James Franklin has done against Ohio State, but you bring up a great point. This isn't a good Ohio State decade they've had. They're number 2 or 4 or 3 or 1 every time they play Penn
Lifetimes,
State.
plural. Ohio State is this squad every year that any of us can remember. So not beating Ohio State, yes, I understand Penn State fans are going to be frustrated. They are thirsty for that championship. They have gotten one since James Franklin has been there. It happened to be a season where they didn't make the 4-team playoff because Ohio State made it instead of them in that year anyway. But this is a year where I do hope, even if it doesn't end in the Big Ten championship, that Penn State fans would still enjoy, embrace, appreciate a potential playoff berth for this team because it would be new ground.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Ross. They could be the number 6 team in the country this year. They might have been the number 6 team year after year, but because it wasn't the top 4, we couldn't see them. Whereas now, let's say they are where the AP has them, as the 6th best team. They could win 1 or 2 playoff games this year, and I think that would change the way people feel about Franklin in big games.
Absolutely. I think we all have to have a little more patience, right? Fan bases, media, whatever, because it used to be, right? If you won more than, or you lost more than 1 game, right, you were probably not going to win the national title in college football. That's not the case anymore. right? And so there are going to be teams with 2 losses, perhaps even 3 down the line that have a chance to at least win a few playoff games. So I think in a way the goalpost on success has probably moved a little bit, and in a good way, in a way where fans should have more patience because there are more playoff spots, to be had. And you will see, I mean, for instance, Penn State, the last 10 years, if you applied the 12-team playoff, the last 10 years, Penn State would have made it, I think, 4, maybe 5 times they would have been in the field. So would fans feel differently about James Franklin if he had advanced to the playoff 4 to the last 5 of the last 10 years in an expanded field and maybe won some playoff games? And who knows, went the distance and got to the national championship game.
Yeah, it's a different barometer now with the 12 teams. I like the way you phrase that. The way we think of success is going to be different moving forward than it has been. It's time for our big interview. We are bringing in one of those star freshmen. Dylan Harper is ready to join us now. Dylan, when was the first time you remember watching a Rutgers basketball game?
First time watching, I think, probably my brother's freshman year is probably like the real first time. But a game I can remember is when I think they played Indiana at the Garden. My brother's senior year. I was like 5th, 6th grade. Corey Sanders, all them guys was there, and they got that big win. That was the first ever moment.
How many of your brother's Rutgers games did you go to?
I went to every home game basically, except for the Purdue game when he hit the game winner. That's the only game I missed.
What are you talking about? Why'd you miss that one?
I had a scrimmage like right before. I'm like, Mom, we gotta go to the Purdue game. She's like, no, like we could watch it on TV. Like it's all good. Go to the next one. And then he did that.
You should have told her, but he's gonna hit the game winner, man.
I wish I would have knew before. I wish I would have knew.
Errors of youth. All right, you'll get better, I'm sure. Tell me the first time you remember meeting Steve Pikiell.
Home visit. My brother's first ever home visit, his senior year. Him, Coach Pike and Coach Knight, they both came to the house to spend time, eat dinner with us. I remember we had this little basketball hoop in the basement. Coach Pike down there, playing with us, making jokes, stuff like that. So honestly, just had a great first time meeting him.
Was he already starting to recruit you back then?
He throws little jokes here and there, like he throws his little hints out, but it wasn't really hard recruiting until he got to high school.
Yeah. What do you remember about talking with him once you already had your brother on that team and you kind of got to know him a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing he always told me is that, he's not recruiting me just for my brother. He's recruiting me for me too, which was honestly special for me because he's just like, yeah, my brother had all this, but, we're here because of you. Like, we love your game and we see something very bright in you.
How are you different from your brother?
How am I different? I think we play 2 different roles on the court, but I think we're both similar in a way. I mean, I have the ball in my hands a lot in the game. He plays off the ball in the wing, but I think we're both great defenders. I think the best part about both of our games are IQ. We could really pass the ball, score the ball. We just make the right play always. But we're very different, but very similar at the same time.
What about personality-wise? How are you guys similar or different?
I think for me, I'm more like the quiet one, quiet one. He's more outgoing, obviously. Like, he loves doing, talks and stuff, camps and stuff. I'm more, quiet in the background. But, I think once you get to know me, I'm really talkative.
Yeah, but who's more handsome?
I mean, I'm going to say me.
There you go.
I'm not going to. But it's me for sure.
That was a layup, man. You kind of stuttered there for a second, but I knew you'd come through. Take me inside practice at Rutgers the last handful of weeks once things started to get serious. What has been the thing that Steve Pikiell has been saying to you guys again and again in practice?
I mean, just play for each other. I mean, the only way we're going to win is if we work hard in practice, go in there with a mindset that we got to get better each and every day and fix every mistake so we can be the best team possible and just play for each other because, you can't win a game with 1, 2, 3 guys. It got to be a whole collective group, plus the coaching staff. So that's been the main vocal point.
What about X and O-wise? What is he pushing more? Is it better passing? Is it better shooting? Is it getting to the line more?
I mean, it's honestly playing fundamental, playing the right way, making the right pass, the right read, just being unselfish is how we really want to play, and I think Coach Pikiell's really emphasized that all season.
I mentioned you're one of these two superstar freshmen alongside Ace Bailey. When was the first time you met Ace?
First time I met Ace, in person or on the phone?
Sure.
I mean, in person, I think it got to be the first time I met him was at Sharif Cooper camp my sophomore year. He was there working the camp. That's the first time I met him. First time I seen him, I was like, man, he tall, like, because I've never seen him. So, like, looking at him, he's like 6'8", 6'9", lanky. Like, he's just tall, just like, dang, like. I knew he was going to be such right there because, you just see the work ethic, everything he puts in. But the first time on the phone was, I think, his first visit sophomore year. One of the coaches called me, and we chopped it up from there. We got each other's number and just went up from there.
How do you describe his game?
The game. He could do it all, really. I mean, I think he's a very underrated passer, which people will see this year because, he gets the ball to people in the right time. But, he's a prolific scorer, shoots over anyone, sees no contest. That's one thing I've learned. He sees no contest. I think no one can stop him in college basketball. I think for him to play his game and just to stay poised, I mean, he's probably one of the best players out here.
You mentioned that you're a little quieter than your brother. How are you and Ace similar or different personality-wise?
Ace is outgoing. He's always like the fun. He's the spotlight of the show every time. Every time he walks in, he lights a room up. He's gonna make you laugh about 4 to 5 times in the span of like 10 minutes. So I mean, just his energy. Every time he walks in the room, he's gonna put a smile on someone's face. So I mean, that's the greatest thing about him.
Which one of you committed first to Rutgers?
He did. He committed like early sophomore year. Like real early sophomore year or junior year, one of the two. But I think he committed early, and he was pushing it ever since he committed.
I was going to say, how much was he pushing you? But it sounds like a lot.
He was calling me every day, but every time we were on the phone or text, it was more about just like, how's your day going? Like regular conversation stuff, because like me and him really close. So I mean, it was more like brother talk more than like, you got to come here. But that is like, he's probably one of the main reasons why I really came here.
Mentioned your brother played at Rutgers. Your dad, of course, Ron Harper, played with those great Chicago Bulls teams back in the day. Give me the coolest memorabilia that your dad has in the house somewhere.
And them rings, them 5 rings he got in the house, crazy. It's like, it's in a little line. You see from 1 to 5s, it's crazy, honestly. Them rings is crazy. They're heavy, like real diamond stuff. They shine, stuff like that. I remember being younger, just like trying to put one on, did not fit my finger, but I mean... that's probably the coolest thing. Those and the little trophy, the mini trophies everyone gets.
You ever sneak one? Just grab the ring for a day, stick it in your pocket, just walk around with it?
I've tried. Definitely tried. He wasn't going for it though. He know where his rings be at all the time. That's one thing about him. He gonna know where his rings at.
Yeah, I bet. One of the last things I want to talk to you about was when you played in the McDonald's All-American game, you were the co-MVP. You're surrounded by talent everywhere. What do you remember about what happened on that day? I
mean, I think our class, probably one of the most competitive classes out there. We weren't taking anything for granted. We all went out there with like a mindset of we're going to try to win the game. Obviously, we didn't win, but just the environment was great. I mean, that's such a prestigious game that you get to play in. Not everyone gets to play in it, but for the people that got selected, we're honestly just blessed.
Dylan, awesome to talk with you, man. Really appreciate it. And best of luck this freshman season there in Piscataway. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
9 games into his career at Indiana, Curt Cignetti has already broken a record, the most wins in a first season in Hoosier history. The team's now 9-0 with Michigan at home this Saturday. Ross, it's true, they were behind this past week for the first time ever. Gave up points in the first quarter for the first time ever. Lost a quarter this weekend for the first time ever this season. Then they scored 47 unanswered points.
It's remarkable. We were waiting to see some weakness and vulnerability in Indiana, and we got it in the first quarter, but only for a quarter. And then bam, they just took over, not just offensively, but defensively too. We talk a lot about the offense, but Anthony, this defense pitched a shutout in 3 quarters and forced 3 turnovers, 2 on downs, The other, I think, an interception that led to 17 of Indiana's points. So talk a lot about the offense, but the defense got it done as well. How about this stat? Michigan State had 123 yards in their first 2 drives of the game. They had 70 yards on the next 10. Remarkable, just all-around complete performance that we're seeing in Bloomington from Kirk Cignetti's group, and it's why, we feel bound toward an undefeated Indiana heading into Columbus in a couple of weeks for a game against Ohio State that is, I don't know, perhaps the biggest game in Indiana football history.
Right, man. I got to tell you, Ross, I'm right there with you. And the way that Indiana's been performing on defense, because it's been every level. That's the thing that stands out about Indiana, is that there are no weaknesses in their game. And it would have been difficult for anyone to imagine that statement making sense about the Indiana Hoosiers in football coming into this season. But you want production at quarterback. Curtis Rourke can give you efficiency, precision, accuracy on the short and intermediate game. He can direct traffic pre-snap. He can certainly be a guy to feed the ball deep down the field as well. So you get the full arsenal from the quarterback position. You want a squad that can run the football. They've got 3 different running backs who can both batter you between the tackles. They can pass protect. They're willing to stick their nose in there. And yes, they got wiggle and burst out into the open field. They've got wide receivers that can make plays in every quadrant of the route tree. And you're mentioning that Hoosiers defense, a defensive front. That's really the main position where there's a bunch of depth on Indiana, because they have been a remarkably healthy team, even though, yes, even at backup quarterback, we saw Taven Jackson have to step in there and do big things just 2 weeks ago. But their D-line is deep, speedy, talented. They rotate a bunch of bodies through there. They can stuff the run with the #1 run defense in the Big Ten Conference, and they can rush the quarterback as well. We've talked a lot about the linebackers and Aiden Fisher and Jaleel Walker, what they do sideline to sideline, penetrating into the backfield. And we're seeing more and more in recent weeks how this secondary from the Hoosiers makes plays on the ball in flight. And what Bryant Haynes does in marrying his rush with coverage principles that are there. This is a team that every phase, every way you want them to get it done, the Indiana squad is showing that they can win games in every way and every phase.
They are ranked in the top 10 of the AP for only the 5th season in the history of Indiana football, and they've been playing football since 1887.
Long time.
There in Bloomington.
Yeah.
Now, they're at the very, very top of the Big Ten, but right underneath them, you see Minnesota and Iowa, 2 teams that picked up wins, very different styles of victories for them this past weekend, but each of them now pick up their 6th win on the season. What's your take on these 2 programs now being bowl eligible?
Well, let's start with the Hawkeyes, right? They should probably keep on keeping on with the quarterback, right? Brennan Sullivan, kind of big kid, gives them another dimension there on the ground. I think he had 60 yards, scored a couple touchdowns, 1 rushing, one passing. Only 7 of 10, I think, through the air. But he adds that extra dimension, Anthony. That was really impressive, and I think led to them continuing drives. Tim Lester, Iowa's first-year offensive coordinator, take a bow, right? The Hawkeyes scored more than 40 points for a 4th time this season. That's as many times that they scored 40 points the last 4 years combined. So really impressive what we're seeing from them in that offense. And Brennan Sullivan maybe adds something that we'll see maybe. Hey, this team isn't completely out of it, and certainly you can keep on fighting and you build on right this late season for next year. Minnesota, 4 straight wins: USC, UCLA, Maryland, and then at Illinois this past week. Really impressive run. The Illinois game. Just we talked about Illinois is a playoff caliber team just a couple weeks ago, right? And Max Brosmer and Minnesota go in there and get a huge win. Brosmer playing exceptionally well lately. 7 TDs, 0 picks, Anthony, in his last 3 starts. And of course, you saw Darius Taylor against Illinois, and Illinois defense that again we discussed was pretty dang good. Run for 100 yards his first time, reaching that mark in a month. Big win for PJ Fleck, right? 8th year, he's taken the Gophers now to 6 bowl games in that stretch. And Anthony, keep an eye on November 23rd. The Gophers host Penn State.
That is going to be one to definitely keep your eye on with the way Minnesota is starting to play. There's no doubt about that, Ross. I got to talk to PJ Fleck yesterday on Big Ten Radio, and one of the things that I was asking about was the way that Max Brosmer has been able to expand the passing offense for Minnesota. And we've seen a couple of different times because PJ Fleck teams are certainly known for running the football and brutalizing their opponents on the line of scrimmage. This season hasn't been as much about that. To your point, with the idea that Darius Taylor hasn't been just this, century mark machine on the ground over and over again, but not only Daniel Jackson and others at wide receiver, but Brosmer has been able to feed the ball to Darius Taylor out of the backfield. We've seen this expansion of the running back position as a part of the passing attack for the Gophers. That's really been something that's allowed their offense to continue to have production from the backfield when they haven't necessarily had it to the same extent we're accustomed to with that brutalizing rushing attack. And the defense, now that they're winning, frankly, folks are recognizing how well Minnesota is playing on defense against the pass. The rush defense is getting better and better. And when they are able to get a lead on an opponent, we're seeing Ja Joyner and others with the way they can rush the quarterback. So they can take it away with Corey Parrish on the back end. They can rush the quarterback. They can stuff the run. So now this is a much more complete football team than they appeared to be earlier in the year. From the perspective of the Iowa Hawkeyes, we've seen it with both quarterbacks. There's a lot of credit to Tim Lester and Kirk Ferentz and how having an experienced offensive line has made such a big difference for what Iowa's been able to do. Gotten to call a couple of the Hawkeyes games this season on the Big Ten Network. And yes, it's been Cade McNamara a few times where they've hit that 40-point mark. And you mentioned what they get with the mobility of the quarterback position with Brendan Sullivan in the lineup. He's got to protect the football, and he's been able to do that in limited action so far this season. So they don't need a volume of pass attempts, but it does feel like his mobility is opening up some additional run windows, some rush lanes for Caleb Johnson and what he's doing as a running back. I was just able to speak to Caleb Johnson the other day about the way that he's continued to improve. He's become a better pass protector. He's become a better pass receiver. His burst in the open field has always been there, but he's wanted to make sure that his creativity as a runner has been accentuated even more this season. When he gets anywhere near the end zone, he's able to finish those runs. So it's really impressive what Iowa's been able to do on the ground. And, of course, we know what they do with their defense and special teams.
Right. I mean, even without a dynamic passing attack, they've doubled their point production from last year. They averaged 15 points a game last year. They're up to 30 this year. Well, one of the best ways to win in football, of course, is to get the ball more than the other guy has it. One way to do that is to force a turnover. That's something Urban Meyer knows an awful lot about. He's going to explain how to do that best after this. Off to Oregon, Anthony.
Enjoy it.
Tailgate bound. First time we're doing our show from Eugene, Saturday, 10 Eastern, 9 Central, 7 Pacific time. It is going to be great to be at the number one team in the country. Speaking of number one, at the end of the year, they hand out trophies to just the number one player at certain various positions. Anthony's Impact 5 is going to count down who he thinks the leading candidates are in the Big Ten to win some of these awards. We're going to start off with the Hendricks Award, which, of course, goes to the top defensive end in the USA.
Of course. There's no one who doesn't know that. I get to vote on this major award. It is election season, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the top candidates for these awards. And to me, yes, there are many great pass rushers in the Big Ten and in college football, but when you talk about the totality of what you get from a defensive end, my guy's Mikal Kamara from the Indiana Hoosiers. What he does throughout the game is really important for Indiana because he's willing and able to be a run stuffer. They move him. He penetrates into the backfield. But we see Indiana at moments like, yes, they just trailed for the first time last week against Michigan State, but they've had a number of close games in the fourth quarter, and he is the most dominant closer that we see in college football who's able to shut the door on the opponent over and over again, sacking the opposing quarterback, putting Indiana in a position to hit that throttle, not only offensively, but with their defense as well.
At number 4, you have the Mackey Award, which goes to the top tight end in the country.
No doubt. And this, to me, I think when you look at Tyler Warren and what he brings to the table, he can not only be a candidate for the Mackey Award, you can put him up for the Paul Hornung Award as well. But he is such an immense part of Penn State's offensive production this season that it's not only as an inline release tight end. It's not only as a guy who can line up wide outside or be in the slot. We've seen him at so many different positions, and that versatility is just something you rarely see from a tight end. Yeah, you'll see some guys who can be an inline blocker. You'll see some guys who can split out a little bit. He does so many different things and handles the football in so many different ways. He's able to go up and moss people to get the football. He's got immense and incredible run after catch. Also, he is just such a versatile playmaker. I don't see any other tight end in the country doing things in the way that Tyler Warren does.
He might be your best lock among all of these to win that one, I would argue. Yeah. At number 3, you've got the Doak Walker Award for the best running back.
And this one, yes, there are some guys putting up big numbers. And, of course, Ashton Jeanty is going to be difficult to surmount in this category. But when you look at what Caleb Johnson does, what Caleb Johnson means to the Iowa offense, the percentage of offensive production the Hawkeyes have to count on him for, then that to me really sets him apart from even Ashton Jeanty. You compare him with Boise State offense, where Jeanty has Maddox Madsen, who's actually leading the Mountain West Conference in touchdown passes. There's more balance to the way the Broncos operate on offense. You know, every time you face the Iowa Hawkeyes, your main primary goal needs to be to stop Caleb Johnson. There hadn't been an opponent yet this season who's been able to make that happen, and he leads the nation in 20-plus yard runs. That type of production and the percentage of Iowa's offense that is on his shoulders, I do think he should get serious consideration, if not be the front runner for the Doak Walker.
If there was MVP, just straight value at any position, he might be the runaway winner at that. The QB Award, the Davey O'Brien, who you got?
And this one, I mean, there's a player in Curtis Rourke from Bloomington, from the Indiana Hoosiers, who will deserve Heisman consideration, is beginning to get more and more of that. But just specifically, the way he's executing the play at quarterback is just going beyond what most other players in the country are able to do. The precision and accuracy he throws the football with, the anticipation he does so with as well, and the variety of ways that he's able to feed the football around to so many different playmakers. He throws guys open, he hits them in stride, and the way he's able to do that, even battling back from the thumb injury and returning to action and able to lead Indiana back into a game, you see what he means to that entire program.
And number 1, you mentioned the word Heisman Trophy. Big Ten's best shot is,
I believe, Dillon Gabriel. And, I mean, yes, there are going to be multiple players who get the type of acclaim for this award, not only in the Big Ten but around the country. But the number 1 team in the country with a quarterback who came in with as much scrutiny, as much expectation as anyone in the country, who came in the transfer portal. And you can make a case that Dillon Gabriel has gone even beyond that. And the early season struggles of their offensive line, the early inconsistencies of their rushing attack, Dillon Gabriel has provided everything that the Oregon Ducks could have hoped he would provide and more. I do believe he should be the front runner for the Heisman.
Ross, we got 30 seconds for you to respond to all those Anthony Awards.
Wow. Oh, that's all I get? No, it was such a good list. That's all I need. It was great. Hard to argue with any of that. I think where the Big Ten, where these Big Ten players have the best chance is number 1, right? Tyler Warren winning. I think that he's probably in the lead when it comes to that. And I think as far as quarterback, I think that Dillon Gabriel has a real shot at that and has a real shot in the Heisman Trophy presentation. But there's a guy in Miami, Cam Ward, that would give him a little contesting.
Yeah, Ward will be tough. Jeanty will be tough as well. That could be a really heated Heisman race. Any other thing we should think about award-wise?
Well, I mean, the Indiana offensive line, if there's a position group where they're a little bit thin up front, it is offensive line. They've maintained health, and they've been so good. They are dominant up front. They can protect the quarterback. They block the run. You look at the way that Mike Kadick as a center on the interior of everything just leads the way for the Hoosiers. The Joe Moore Award goes to the top offensive line in the country. And if there's a group that's not the Indiana Hoosiers, there's others who could be in consideration for it, but Indiana should certainly be one of the finalists for that.
And I'll tell you what, maybe the postseason award that's the biggest lock right now is the head coach. Hard to think that is not going to Kurt Cignetti. For Ross and Anthony, I'm Mike. Thanks for watching.